Here is the Columbia release of The American President. Letterboxed, but of course being a Columbia release, that means you got to play the DADC Rot Lottery. I picked this up because it actually is a DADC Austria pressing. So I wasn't even looking for it. I just came across it cheap and decided to check the disc ring, and luckily enough it was an Austrian release. Nice amount of liner notes. The jacket looks nice and classy. I don't know if this has AC3 on it. It doesn't say on the jacket. It does credit a Dolby Surround 2.0 digital track. Of course, this being 95, it's in that transition period. Not every disc credited or had AC3, and not every film was specifically mixed in it. And even if it was, 90% of the time you were still hearing the Dolby SR 2.0 track in theaters. But so it's a nice looking release. Just look for the Austrian pressing to avoid rot issues. Here is the standard letterbox release of Apollo 13, one of the big, well-known and super common Laserdisc titles. A film very well known for its sound design. Unfortunately, this being the first edition, it's one of those universal discs that they didn't go for AC3 or any 5.1. So it has the THX mastering, has a really nice transfer, nice cover as well. Looks a bit fancier than the standard universal jackets, but it just has a 2.0 Dolby Matrix PCM track, which does actually sound quite nice, I will admit. But you have to get the signature edition to get the extras, and that's when they added the 5.1 AC3. Later on, they did a DTS release without the features, but of course that's very rare and goes for a lot of money on the used market. So if you want to get a good Laserdisc of this film, or you just have this one, you know, you're not missing a ton by not having the, well, no, it's sad that they don't have the 5.1 on here, but it's still a nice solid disc. And as far as I can tell, it's the same source transfer as what's on the signature and stuff. Anyway, you'll want to get the signature edition to get the 5.1 and the extras, or you can spring for the extremely expensive DTS version, or grab the various DVDs, Blu-rays, and there's now the new 4K release. So ultimately, this is still a really nice Laserdisc. Don't beat yourself up if you don't have one of the fancier, more expensive versions, because this is still a really solid mid-90s great transfer with a really nice ProLogic enabled Dolby Surround mix. Just unfortunately no 5.1 or extras. Now here's one of the super common titles that's definitely going to or needs to be in every collection. This is the letterbox release of Braveheart from Paramount, pressed by Pioneer, with the THX mastering seal of approval. I do love the cover art on this. I think this is still the best cover art for the film, and you know, though the Blu-ray is nice, the more modernized cover just doesn't have the grandeur of this. Plus, everybody's so used to this, I think you can't get away from it. Anyway, it's actually a really nice Laserdisc for being so common and so simplistic. It has a nice gatefold though. I have the original inserts here. I picked this one up because it was actually still sealed, and as you can see, it still has the offer for the free Braveheart hat and the notification that Gibson won the Golden Globe for Best Director in '96. It also has this nice little insert about AC3, the various titles that were then available from Paramount and other labels. Of course, Clear and Present Danger's in here, along with Stargate, Drop Zone, Virtuosity, and Forrest Gump with that weird 5.1 mix. So anyway, I do like this all about AC3 little blurb here, because it actually gives you important technical data and a pictorial representation of what 5.1 is supposed to do. So this is a lot more helpful than the little piece of paper inside True Lies. This is actually quite nice that, you know, I'm sure they had this as signs printed for store displays and stuff. So that's a nice bonus there. And don't forget, get your Braveheart cap for only $10.95 from Pioneer. So, just in case. I don't think they'll still be able to give you the hat anymore. Really nice gatefold, I have to say. Actually gives you some nice imagery across the entire width. Otherwise, it just gives you the standard chapter listing. Film spread across 4 sides. No special features, so you get nice inserts. And like I said, this is an extremely common title, so don't pay more than $1 or so for it. Like I said, I never really intended on picking this up until I decided to check out what the quality of the transfer was like, and I found this one still sealed with the hype stickers on it for literally nothing. And it has an outstanding Dolby AC3 track. It has a Dolby Surround digital mix, which sounds exemplary. It's not as good as the 5.1 because of the technical limitations, but it's still no slouch if you don't have an RF demodulator. The transfer itself is great. Great color, great detail. Of course, a high-end top catalog release from 95, 96 on Laserdisc is going to pretty much look as good as it can, unless there was some snafu in the process or somebody screwed up something. So it's going to be very hard for a disc to look really bad by this point. So definitely, if you haven't gotten this, or you're interested in the film, or you've never seen it and you come across it, it's going to be in every bin because it's so common. For some reason, it's just like one of the 4 or 5 discs that's in every single lot of discs or bin of Laserdiscs for sale. I know a lot of people have joked about it on some of the Facebook groups, GoldenEye, and a few others. But it really is a good benchmark reference disc for the format. And I was curious to see, comparing to the later versions, if there were any differences in color timing or sound design, if the sound had gotten changed or anything, which I don't really think it has. I think pretty much a lot of the differences are going to come from mastering to analog video versus the new HD and now 4K scans. But I will say this does look like how I remember first seeing it on an old CRT back long ago. So you do get that nice bit of nostalgia from watching the analog transfer from back in the day. But still, really great title, really great disc. Nice packaging, no extras or anything, but just one of those benchmark titles that everybody should have. You can really, judge your system by one of those. Here is another film I have never seen. It's the deluxe widescreen presentation of City Hall. I just found it still in the shrink wrap for $1. So with this cast list, I really couldn't say no. Pretty standard looking Columbia style jacket with a lot of very tiny production notes. At least you do get that. Has a 2.0 Perlogic surround track, no 5.1. I think the DVD may have 5.1, but I'm not for certain. So I have to check this film out, but it can't be all that bad with this cast list and a screenplay with input from both Paul Schrader and Nicholas Pileggi and a Jerry Goldsmith score. So again, how can you go wrong with those? Here's one I've wanted to see for a while, and finding this on laser, I figured why not. This is the letterbox edition of The Crossing Guard. It's actually a Disney disc, I believe, because it's a Miramax. Yeah, it's a Miramax title. Does have a THX mastering moniker printed on here. Has the usual Disney terminology logo usage down here. Nice looking cover. I actually I really like this image. Could use gone without the critical blurb there, but that's an old style of packaging design. Does have an audio commentary on the analog track, in addition to a Dolby Surround encoded PCM track and a Dolby AC3 mix. Now, again, I haven't seen this yet, but I'm sure the tracks will probably be roughly about the same, seeing as this is more of a intense drama, lower budgeted film, not really a big, action piece. So I'm definitely going to compare those two. I do like the rear cover design. I do like the rear cover. It's a little busy in terms of layout, but keeping with the red and sort of yellow-orange burned out, very dark imagery, kind of fits with the cover. So it looks pretty nice. I'm going to have to check this out. And again, being a Disney title, it has the sort of Disney layout with the chapter box here and all the terminology and logos on the bottom. check that one out. Here is the letterbox release of Death in the Maiden. I've been meaning to check out all the other various Polanski films, especially some of these from the early 90s that have either had a spotty or very, well, let's just say very rough video history. There's a number of his films that have either, not gotten much distribution here in the States, or have gone out of print, or, it's hard to track down. So I found this and figured I'd pick it up since I'd never really seen it. I think I may have seen part of it once. Nice looking jacket design for the most part. It's pretty simple. It's a New Line release via Image, and the Turner banner has a 2.0 Dolby Surround encoded track, no 5.1. So it does have not only the trailer but 2 TV spots, so at least you get that, but no bonus features or anything. So I'm going to try that out. Been meaning to see that for ages, that and Bitter Moon, and there's a whole lot of others of his that just have kind of gone by the wayside. This is the Fox letterbox release of French Kiss. This is another Lawrence Kasdan film that I'd never really gotten around to, so it was literally a quarter, so I couldn't say no. I do like the kind of updated Fox banner across the top. They kind of switched to a small black banner like this with the yellow spotlights. It's an updated version of their old jacket, but for this, as you can see, they kind of went with a rouge, off red color, kind of a burgundy. So I don't know if they use that a whole lot or if it's supposed to be like their rom-com banner or something, but I don't know, I just thought it was a nice touch. I thought it really went with the jacket. Even though it's updated, you can still see the remnants of the old rear cover design. There's the old special widescreen edition logo. It's letterboxed with a Dolby Surround digital track. This does not have a 5.1 track, which I think the DVD does. So, but you do get a nice bit of production notes. So I'm going to have to check this out along with the other Kasdan Laserdiscs that I've picked up. Now here's a really fun one. This is the MGM letterbox release of Get Shorty, also with the THX moniker stamped on it. I do love that it uses the original poster artwork, which has kind of been lost in favor of some Photoshop montages on a lot of the later releases. But it's actually a pretty darn nice transfer. I was quite surprised at how good it looked. It does have a ProLogic PCM track along with the AC3. I will say that because it's a very dialogue heavy film, it's not really going to have a lot of surround usage, but when it does, I would give the nod to the AC3. You do get a audio commentary from the director Barry Sonnenfeld on the analog track, which is it's a pretty nice commentary. It's not going to be earth-shattering or anything, but I've listened to it and it's pretty informative. It's a nice, relaxed track. Other than that, you do get a deleted scene at the very end, along with the theatrical trailer. So you do get a little bit of extras in here. And of course, this was later supplanted by the DVD, and then eventually the special edition, and then the Blu-ray with those having some extra features. And it's just announced that I believe Shout Factory is going to do their own Blu-ray special edition. So it's unknown whether they're just going to use the old master or make a new one, but still, it's a very underrated film. It's one of those films that every time I see it, I wish it was a bit longer, because when it's over, I'm kind of wanting it to go a little bit more. And it's always a pleasant watch to come back to, and it's a really nice Laserdisc that's one of these really solid mid-90s MGM releases that they really tried to up their game a bit. And it shows. I really do think it shows. I love these MGM releases from this era. Now here's a pretty important title that not a lot of people talk about. It's not really rare or anything, but this is the Warner Brothers letterbox release of Heat, the Michael Mann thriller that most people nowadays call a modern classic, a crime epic, because it's basically 3 hours long. But I do have some problems with it. I do think it is a bit of a mess at times, but it does have so many well, so many strengths to it that you really can't discount it entirely. But the reason why this Laserdisc is important is man has a history and a tendency to go back and, if not recut his films, recolor time them, retransfer them to appear different from their theatrical release, and in many cases remix the soundtrack. And a lot of people have noticed that this film, it seemed like the soundtrack got less aggressive and more conventional over time, and that things were moved around in the effect placement, so on and so forth. I'm not 100% an expert on this issue, but I have kind of played around and looked at it. A lot of people have also said that this 5.1 AC3 on here makes their system sound almost like it's broken, or they thought their speakers were out of balance or phase or whatever. And what it actually is the sound design of this track is really interesting. It's very aggressive, and it's got all kinds of different levels, and then especially in all of the gunfights, the heist scenes, basically any of the big set pieces, it really takes a more aggressive and less conventional attack to the actual effect placement and sound design, which is really interesting, and I really admire that. And it seems they have kind of toned that down or taken that out in some of the later releases. You'd really have to play them back to back to do a direct comparison, and I've kind of done that with some of the other ones, and some instances it's very subtle, some they sound the same, but then there's others where this gets extremely loud and in your face, whereas the other does not hit that same level. So this is one of those where you'll have to either track this down, or I think the first DVD and the snapper case one uses the same transfer, and 5.1 is this, so you can pick that up and compare it to the Blu-rays or the new director's remastered Blu-ray. But anyway, as far as the Laserdisc, it's a really nice glossy jacket with the original artwork. Of course, this is pretty much designed for VHS because it has dead space on the sides, but I still think it looks pretty classy. The text is very small. The film is spread across 3 sides, and it's so long they could have easily just used the 4th side to break it up a little and give us a CAV side if they felt like it, but they just kept it to 3. And as I mentioned before, it has the really aggressive 5.1 AC3. It also has a Dolby Pro Logic encoded PCM track, which is also excellent, but it's nowhere near as effective as the 5.1 because it doesn't have the discrete channels. I'd say I did some kind of A-Bing back and forth between the two, and I'd say you at least get the idea. I'd say you get maybe 70 to 80% of the discrete effects that are in the 5.1, but it's not as impactful because it doesn't have the ability to fully separate those effects into the different channels. So I would definitely say get this for the 5.1 or track down that first DVD. I'm pretty sure they're the same. I don't have that first DVD, but I've heard it's supposed to be the same. But anyway, the transfer is it's pretty good. It's not that great, and I was a little disappointed in the picture quality because for a 95, 96 Warner Brothers big release, you'd think their video quality would be on par with the others, but I think Warner Brothers in the Laserdisc realm, they can be hit or miss. And this one, it's a good solid transfer, but it does have a bit of noise in the picture. The color is good, but it seems like the detail could be better. I don't know if this was just how they wanted it to look, but it's certainly not quite up there with other releases of the era. Like, I wouldn't even say it looks as good. I'd say even Get Shorty looks maybe a little bit sharper, but I'm just kind of nitpicking. It's not like it's a bad picture or anything, but the picture quality, I'd say it's maybe like a 3.5 out of 5 instead of like a 4.5 out of 5 or something. So don't pick this up and expect it to knock your socks off in terms of image quality. But it's solid all around, but you're really going to want to pick this up for that AC3 track, which I think is very interesting. And you do get the nice frameable artwork Unfortunately, it's a thin jacket with 2 discs shoved in, so you're always going to run into cover and ring wear and such. Here is the special unrated edition of Leaving Las Vegas, the MGM letterbox release. This is actually a pretty nice release, I think. The picture quality is actually quite good, because this film was actually shot on Super 16mm and then blown up to 35mm for the regular release. So it's always going to be very grainy, very soft. You know, it's not going to have the polish of a 35mm shoot, because it was essentially a low-budget indie in a lot of ways. So, you know, that was getting more and more common to happen in the 90s with Super 16 films getting blown up to 35 once somebody else bought them or they got put into general release. Even Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels was a 16mm shoot that was blown up to 35mm for the release prints. But anyway, I think that kind of helps the quality of the story and the environment the film sets up, and it's really a great piece of work. This is a really nice MGM release. It's very common, so you can find this pretty easily. It is, you know, credited as the unrated version. I want to say it's got a couple minutes put back in. I don't know the exact time difference between this and the rated version. But you do get the theatrical trailer at the end. And other than that, there's no special features to say, but it's a really nice release. It has a Dolby Surround encoded PCM track, no 5.1, and I don't think this film had 5.1 to begin with, because again, lower budget. But still, I think this has kind of gotten forgotten over time, and it's a really great picture, and one of those you can just point to and say, you know, uses evidence for Nick Cage as actually a really, really great dramatic actor, and you know, I guess heights that you wish that people would hit again, you know. So really, really interesting picture that I wish more people talked about these days. Here is the Paramount release of Virtuosity, pressed by Pioneer. As seen before in the Braveheart insert, this does have an AC3 track in addition to a 2.0 Prologic encoded mix. This isn't, you know, it's a relatively forgotten and certainly dated 90s science fiction film, but you know, I think it does have some really interesting elements, and you know, 2 really great actors, you know, at least playing well off of each other, even if the plot setup is, yeah, it's hokey. But anyway, it's a nice Laserdisc jacket. I do like that they at least tried to give it some pizzazz and tie it into the sci-fi and computer techie elements of the film with the typeface, the color, the you know, the fact that these are kind of polygonal, or you know, it's just it kind of fits the tone of the film. It just looks interesting, and at least it changes it up from just the standard jacket designs. The picture quality is actually pretty good on this. It's very watchable, and the AC3 is quite nice, and it does sound better than the Prologic track. So again, just a nice solid AC3 release for the modulator fans. Here's one of the rom-coms I've picked up on Laserdisc that I've never seen. This is While You Were Sleeping. It's a letterbox release with a THX mastering stamp. I don't know why THX was starting to master rom-coms, but okay. I mean, you were just paying to get that on there pretty much. It's not like they really did very much. It does have a Dolby Surround encoded digital track, and I don't think, yeah, this doesn't have AC3 or anything, so it's just the Prologic encoded 2.0. Again, it looked like a nice lighter film, so again, just a cheap Laserdisc, so I figured why not. I'm gonna have to give this a watch and see what the transfer is like. Alright, so here we have the pretty common release of the Birdcage MGM UA disc, letterboxed, and like I said, it's a pretty commonly available title. This one has a little bit of ring wear and damage. This is at the point MGM switched to having the thinner Warner style covers, so they're a lot more prone to that on some of these. It's actually a pretty nice transfer of, a very funny movie. So obviously being a comedy, very dialogue driven, you're not going to notice a lot from a surround soundtrack. So this does have a Dolby AC3 track in addition to the ProLogic encoded PCM, but because it's so dialogue driven, it's not really going to be that noticeable. This isn't an AC3 disc to throw on to wow your friends, really. But I did compare the two, and of course the AC3 is going to give you the better sound separation that you'll primarily notice in, when the actual soundtrack swells up. So anyway, no special features other than that, but a nice whimsical cover to go with the sort of whimsical tone of the film. So very common, nice transfer. Here's another one that's very common, and I actually think this movie is very underrated. This is Broken Arrow from Fox with a THX mastering stamp. I do like the way this cover looks. It's actually a glossy printing, which is nice. Even though it is the theatrical poster, then of course they had it sized already for VHS artwork. It does look more impressive on this than the VHS and certainly the DVD and Blu-ray because it's so much smaller and uses the updated Fox banner. And instead of having yellow searchlights, I think this is kind of fun. This actually has flames. I don't know if that's really visible, but it's actually a fireball inside the Fox logo. That took me a while to spot, but I just thought that was kind of cute. On the rear, it's actually a nice jacket. It looks more like the panel of a gatefold. I like the way they used an image from the film diffused against some actually pretty interesting production notes. It's not just the usual PR blurbage. The film, of course, is directed by John Woo, and this kind of was what led up to him doing Face Off, again with John Travolta, but I think this film is not only better, it's far more interesting, and it has a quirky tone to it, which I think comes from the fact that Graham Yost wrote it right after he wrote Speed, and in a lot of ways this is sort of a mishmash of tone. If you imagine Face Off with some of elements of Speed in it, you kind of are pretty close to Broken Arrow. It's average in some places, yes, but it's a fun 2 hours, and it has a really great dynamic soundtrack. It has a 2.0 ProLogic digital track and then the 5.1 AC3. The AC3 is a lot better in terms of spatial effects and imaging than the 2.0, but again, the ProLogic mix, by this point they had gotten so good at making them that you don't lose a whole lot of the 5.1 advantages. I would say if you don't have a demodulator, you're getting at least 70 to 80% of what you get from the AC3. So don't think you're missing out a whole lot. There's a DTS version that, like all DTS discs, is quite rare and goes for very big money. If you want to hear 5.1, you don't have demodulator, you can get the film on DVD, which I believe is the same exact transfer as this. And then it came out on Blu-ray, and that's available for very cheap. I've compared the Blu-ray audio to the Laserdisc audio, and while the Blu-ray is lossless and technically superior, I just find myself preferring the older track. I don't really know if it's been remixed on the later release because it sounds almost identical, but there's just something about even these old technically tiny AC3 tracks that, once you demodulate them out and everything, they have that extra something, and even in the modern home theater environment. Of course, I'm sure the DTS disc would be equally and more impressive, but this isn't a necessary audio disc. If you have the Blu-ray, you're going to be pretty good, but anytime you can have a really nice AC3 track after you've gone through the hassle of actually getting a demodulator and getting that into your system and having a player with an AC3 out, it's just that little extra bit of magic to see the Dolby AC3 Lite actually come on your receiver for your Laserdisc setting. So anyway, really nice transfer. Not the greatest Laserdisc transfer, but a really solid CLP transfer from the mid-90s when they knew what they were doing, and really great audio, and a nice fun 2 hours. So definitely recommend it. Now here's an interesting one. This is the Fox release of the Crucible, the 1990s version with Daniel Day-Lewis. Gets a THX mastering stamp, so apparently THX decided to go to the Salem witch trials instead of the usual action and sci-fi fare. Again, no rhyme or reason to some of what they would master or not master, but it's nice that it's there, I guess. Pretty nice cover. The rear's interesting. It's kind of got a grayed out look to it, I guess, to, you know, harken back to its literary prestige being the famous Arthur Miller play. And then I guess they thought it was going to be watched in a lot of school and classroom scenarios, which it was. I can vouch for that. I know this was shown in at least 2, if not 3 classes I was in at various times for different reasons. But anyway, it does kind of give a classy look to it, spread across 3 sides with no special features, sadly. But the one special feature it does have that was not originally considered one is the soundtrack. It has a Dolby Surround encoded digital track, which sounds quite nice, but it has an AC3 track, which does sound better. Now, this film was finally released on Blu-ray recently, and for some reason, it was only released with the 2.0 track. The 5.1 is just not on the disc. Now, I don't have that particular release, but I did read the review and thought it was interesting because I could have sworn the very common Laserdisc had 5.1. So sure enough, when I found this in the bins later on, it does indeed have AC3. So I picked it up, and if you're interested in the film or you come across it in the bins, because it's a very common release, this cost me literally $1, it actually has 5.1 AC3 and a really nice transfer. So recommended for that, recommended for the performances, of course, recommended for being, you know, a solid adaptation of, you know, one of the important American stage plays, but definitely recommended for AC3, which is not on the Blu-ray. I do love the cover of this one. This is the standard letterbox release of The English Patient, and it uses the original theatrical poster art quite well, I believe. I like how it meshes with the gold widescreen banner across the top. Again, with the THX mastering stamp. Has Dolby AC3, and again, this had a DTS reissue, which is rare and very expensive. It also came out on the Criterion label with a really nice special edition, but that kind of gets pricey. It's not very commonly found. And that release also has AC3. So if you want a nice Laserdisc copy, but you don't want to spend a bunch, you can pick this one up. Nice gatefold. Although I think the photo montage, you know, I kind of wish they just left that off and left the background image to be by itself. But still, a nice appealing gatefold with your chapter box. And of course, this being a Miramax film, it's a Disney disc, so you get the usual blurbage across the bottom with their logo usage. Rear cover looks pretty nice, I think. I'm a sucker for white and gold text on black. It always looks classy, so that was kind of common for a lot of Miramax and other films around this time period. So anyway, nice transfer and good audio. The AC3 is better than the 2.0, but the film is very easily available on DVD, and the Blu-ray is very cheap. It's a good Blu-ray, not a great one, and I would think if this film came to 4K, a new 4K scan could really look wonderful. But all the current existing discs are fine, so if you're wanting to hear this film in 5.1, you can. You don't have to go out and get a demodulator just to play back one of these discs. And the DTS version, I'm sure must be nice, but again, goes for huge money, so I've never heard it. But anyway, this is the most commonly available of the 3 Laserdisc releases, so I just went ahead and picked it up because I wanted to see what it looked like. Here's one that's become important since the Blu-ray release. This is the Warner Brothers letterbox release of Executive Decision, a really solid, above-average 90s action thriller. Nice cover art replicating the original poster design. Of course, this is a mid-90s Warner's disc, so you can see it's kind of similar to the back jackets for Heat, The Wild Bunch, and actually pretty much most of them had switched to this by this point. It's definitely better than the old Warner design, but I do hate how all of them have tiny text and a lot of dead space around the corners. pretty much all of these got reused for the DVD and tape releases. They just would remove the chapter indexes. 3 sides, no special features. It does have a 2.0 Pro Logic mix in addition to a 5.1 AC3 track, which is great. Again, better than the 2.0 and a really nice 5.1 mix. But what's interesting about this disc is when the Blu-ray was just released, the studio made some censorship decisions to try to make it more palatable for various territories. And admittedly, these are very small, but it wasn't anything extraordinarily offensive to begin with. I wasn't even aware of them until it was brought up on the Blu-ray.com forums. So you can head over there and look up the film's forum page and actually find a detailed list of the few trims and censorings that were made. But all of the previous editions are uncut here in the States. So if you want to see the film 100% untouched, you can track down the DVD or Laserdisc, which share the same master and the same 5.1 track. But it's a very common release. You can get it for very cheap, and it's a nice solid transfer with a great AC3 track. So seek this one out if you want to see the film uncut. Here's the THX mastered release of Ghost in the Darkness, letterboxed. Beautiful, beautiful cover. Again, another underrated film. Not a great film, but very underrated. This is actually very well known in home theater circles for having an outstanding soundtrack, which it does. Of course, another pioneer pressing of a Paramount title. Simple, no special features, 2-sided CLV. But an interesting film that's kind of gotten forgotten, but you can easily watch this just to enjoy the sound design alone, which is excellent. 5.1 AC3 hands down on this one over the 2.0, but the 2.0 itself also sounds fine, but it's just not as good as the AC3. It did make it to DVD using the same master, but has not been updated since then, and there's debate on whether the Laserdisc or the DVD sounds better, and if the DVD may have been remixed. All I know is you can actually find this for very, very cheaply. It's a nice transfer of a good, kind of forgotten, very little talked about film with a near reference track. Just a really great 5.1 track, so very highly recommended on this one. Here we go with the letterbox release of Ghosts of Mississippi. I haven't seen this film since it originally came out. I think we rented it on tape or something back in the day, so this is going to be a first watch in a while for me. Nice looking jacket, although they've put it in one of these things, so anytime you get one of these Warner style covers or even others at this point, it's going to almost always have ring wear or cover dings and such. So this one's in pretty good shape and nice glossy finish. You know, it looks pretty classy. It's a 3-sided transfer with a Pro Logic encoded track. It doesn't list AC3. This would have gotten it had they desired, but since it's not listed anywhere on the packaging, I don't think it has AC3, so I have to spin this one up and actually rewatch it. I just have vague memories of some of these. Now, this is one of the important Laserdiscs that I like to go on and on about, and very few people do, but it's a really good reference benchmark disc. It's very common, but very important. Of course, I'm talking about the letterbox release of Mission Impossible, the first and absolutely best of the series, beautifully using the original poster artwork on the Laserdisc jacket, and then has a fantastic gatefold, which was used as the promo poster in a lot of video stores. Of course, featuring a scene from the Langley break-in, which is still not only the highlight of the film, but the highlight of the entire series. The chapter listings, although you don't get very many chapters, it's kind of well broken up across 3 sides. But it's just one of the best looking gatefolds I've actually come across on the format, so definitely frameable. Pretty standard looking rear cover that was used on all the other releases and the first DVD as well. Of course, gets the THX mastering stamp. In a lot of ways the picture quality is absolutely reference. There's maybe only about 1 or 2 shots that kind of look a little off in terms of picture, But for a Laserdisc, this is outstanding. It easily looks as good as the first DVD, which was a direct port. And then the film had the same crappy transfer, just like the second and third film did, until the new 4K release. So if you want the film as best looking and the best visual qualities possible, definitely get the 4K release. But on the audio side, that's where it's different, and that's what makes this disc very important. Now, it has a 2.0 Pro Logic encoded track, and it has a Dolby AC3 5.1 track. The film was, the sound design was done by Gary Rydstrom, who's very famous for his sound mixes. You'd know him from Terminator 2, Jurassic Park, etc., etc. And he's gone on to, you know, do many more great sound mixes. But for my money, and a lot of other people would agree, his sound design work in the 1990s really set a new reference benchmark level for the entire industry. And all of these tracks really should and deserve to be heard in their full original glory. Now, you say to yourself, well, I've seen the film and, you know, it sounds nice on my, you know, DVD or Blu-ray or 4K. But what you're missing out on is a lot of the track was designed with a very, I wouldn't say heavy and overbearing, but a very, I'm trying to think of the right word, but it's basically, it's got a very nice LFE design for your subwoofer channel. The LFE really comes into play in the action sequences and the various set pieces, and then it's also used in a couple other places in a very kind of well, I'll just go out flat out say it, in a very artistic way, and that has been completely mixed out starting from the DVD moving forwards. Every single release I have checked does not have that. That's led some to think that the Laserdisc, like some others, was, for lack of a better term, cooked in the mix to where, you know, levels were raised to try to make everything seem more impactful and sell a lot of home theater systems and a lot of disc copies. Well, I wondered about that myself until about a year or two ago, they had a De Palma retrospective at one of the local art house theaters, and luckily enough, they managed to get a print of Mission Impossible. And I actually, I begged my way and I got to look at the actual print myself, and it was just a beautiful experience. It was the best I'd seen the film look until the new 4K release was announced and actually finally released. But anyway, as good as this transfer is, no transfer can ever replicate an actual 35mm print. And of course, this film was shot with a lot of deep focus, a lot of cinematic tricks, because De Palma's very fond of those and very fond of, you know, using the cinematography to also tell story. And this film is a crime to watch in pan and scan, so don't ever do that. But anyway, but the soundtrack was the same forceful LFE fueled track that I knew and loved from the Laserdisc, and I was absolutely stunned at how good it sounded, even in this day and age, in a modern theater environment. And trust me, it sounds fantastic. It sounds even better than the new films. And I just recently got to see Fallout, which has a really nice soundtrack design and was also designed for Atmos and has been shown in IMAXs and stuff. And trust me, this beats the pants off of it still. It's one of my favorite soundtracks. And the only way to properly hear it in your home is the Laserdisc. And it's sad but absolutely true that not even the 4K has that proper LFE design. And, you know, admittedly, unless you're a super huge fan of the film like I am, you're not going to notice it right off the bat unless you crank this bad boy up and then you also, you know, put in a different version and just go to the aquarium restaurant sequence, and you'll know pretty fast that either you think your subwoofer's been turned up 5 or 10 levels, or you'll realize that, you know, it all that was simply mixed out. And it is in the theatrical release prints. It's also on the 2.0 mix. So if you don't have an RF demodulator and you want to hear this mix, you can play back the Pro Logic 2.0 track and you'll be able to have all that nice bass content. Of course, the 2.0 does not have the discrete advantages of 5.1, but again, you're getting at least 70 to 85% of the sound design intent. But this is one of the 5 or so discs that I absolutely would say would require any Laserdisc enthusiast to track down a demodulator. This is a great reference disc and absolutely necessary for the original sound design. Plus, it's a beautiful looking disc, very common, and won't cost you more than $1 or $2. And one day somebody at Paramount hopefully will realize that they need to put back the original theatrical audio because it is sorely missing on all the other releases. They should have never remixed it in the first place. So what do you do when you're completely obsessed with a movie? You get the Japanese version. This is the Japanese Mission Impossible release. Looks pretty much the same as the US one, and I never intended to get this, but when a US seller just happened to have this included in the sale posting, I just had to try it. Slip it out of the jacket, and of course it has the original obi strip, which gets caught in the sleeve. There's your obi strip, all your lovely Japanese info. Same cover as the US release, but does have the actual Paramount Mountain logo actually put up here, which is interesting. I guess it's kind of nice if you want to make sure you know it's Paramount. But has the same gatefold, but just in Japanese. The printing's a little different, whereas the US one is kind of glossy. This kind of has more of a flat feel. You do get this nice insert about AC3, which was found in some US ones, but this, of course, is in Japanese. Yeah, it's just single-sided. And you get the little visual identifiers about your channel setup. Here's the rear cover, which, of course, has everything changed to Japanese. This was released by CIC Video in Japan. I always think the Japanese releases have the really interesting looking identification bars at the bottom with the sound format. This has the Dolby AC3. It has the ProLogic included PCM track. It has the THX mastering stamp. In every way, this is identical to the US disc, but it is a Japanese disc, so it is mastered at a different brightness level. So when you put this in and you haven't adjusted your set for a Japanese disc, it's going to appear extremely dark. So you're going to have to compensate for that if you get this release. If I'm remembering correctly, US discs are mastered at 0 IRE level. That's the I can't remember the acronym off the top of my head, but that's the brightness standard, whereas Japanese discs are mastered at 7.5, or I may have flipped that around. I can't remember off the top of my head, but basically what that means is that a lot of Japanese discs you will have to adjust your picture settings for it to appear correctly. But anyway, this also has the same audio that I rave about on the US release, so it's basically a Japanese variant of the US disc with hard-coded subtitles, of course, but still, if this is the version you find yourself picking up instead of the US one, or you're in a different territory, you're still going to absolutely have a fantastic time. And again, being an obsessive fan of this, I couldn't say no to actually having the alternate Japanese version. Here we go with another pretty common title. This is the letterbox release of The Rock. Of course, again, this is a Disney disc in disguise. Gets the THX mastering stamp, has Dolby AC3 in addition to a 2.0 ProLogic track. Nice rear cover. Of course, this was also released in a DTS version and a Criterion release. The Criterion's a nice, expansive special edition that also made it to DVD. That goes for a good amount of money, and then the DTS version goes for ridiculous money, as all DTS discs do. The transfer and sound on here are really great. It's a really, really good example of picture quality for the format, and of course it's very common, so it's the cheapest of the 3 releases. Really nice packaging on this that, although it's a little busy here, I think it looks really nice. You get the usual Disney block of text down here. No special features on here, and the AC3 is better than the 2.0. And of course you can get the film on DVD, and you can also get the Blu-ray, which has a nice lossless track. I do have that, and I compared the audio of these, and they seem roughly identical. Disney seems to have a pretty good habit, or at least did when they were releasing their catalog titles on Blu-ray, of including lossless LCPCM high-res tracks of their original masters without messing with them. So this film, Crimson Tide, and a handful of others that had really good audio tracks and really great Laserdiscs and various DVDs and stuff seem to have actually made it to Blu-ray and not be remixed and actually have lossless tracks encoded on them. Enemy of the State would be another one. So you can get that version, or you can pick this up if you want a affordable Laserdisc copy. But if you're interested in the other two, just be prepared, you're going to be paying quite a bit more. The Criterion a bit more, or you can get the DVD. Or the DTS version will cost you the most out of all of them combined. So here's the Warner Brothers release of Tin Cup, letterboxed. I've never seen this film all the way through. I've seen part of it on cable before, so when it turned up as a cheap Laserdisc, I figured why not. Still in the shrink wrap, and surprisingly doesn't have any corner dings or any of that crud. As you can see, it's in a flimsy jacket. Nice cover though, and of course uses the original poster artwork. 3-sided transfer with a Dolby Pro Logic 2.0 mix. And again, as another example of Warner Brothers cheaping out, this release does not have AC3, which I believe is on the DVD. I don't think this film's come to Blu-ray or anything, but again, when Laserdiscs are this cheap, I figure I'll just check it out, and especially when it gets later on in the cycle, I like to see what all genres achieved with picture quality. I'm always looking for a new test disc title with good picture or sound or both, or a new benchmark, because sometimes you get totally surprised with something like Speed 2 knocking your socks off. So anyway, so it just looked interesting and is in good shape, so I have to check that out. Just wish it had AC3. Speaking of wishing it had AC3, well, here you go. This is the widescreen CAV special edition of Twister. The CLV version looks almost identical, so you have to really differentiate between the two. It was really nice to see them actually press an entire modern film in full CAV. That was not a common thing, especially on a non-expensive, non-box set release. This does get the THX mastering stamp. Of course, lovely rendering of the original poster there. Pretty nice looking rear cover. You can see the usual Warner text block design, but it's definitely much more impressive looking than the Blu-ray case. Has the all-important 5.1 AC3, which is truly great. Of course, this film is well known ever since its release for its sound design, which is excellent for the time period and even still holds up today. There's a lot of debate on which release of the film sounds best. Some people swear by this. Some people prefer the DTS DVD, which used apparently a higher generation source material. And then, of course, there's the Blu-ray, and I believe the British Blu-ray has a different transfer. So there's at least 3 or 4 different versions that you can compare against if you're a huge fan or you want to study the sound design. But anyway, this is a really solid Laserdisc. Not a great transfer like a lot of mid-90s Warner Brothers discs. They can have good or solid transfers, but they're never, top tier like some of the other studios. I don't know why, but it seems even at this point, Warner Brothers were not always trying for 5-star knock it out of the park video transfers. Because from my experience, if I see that it's going to be a Warner Brothers disc, I kind of know going in it's not going to look as good as, say, MGM or a Paramount release. Why this is, I don't know. But it's just, of all the discs I've looked at, I usually know Warner Brothers discs are kind of going to look average for the most part. But anyway, you're coming to this disc for the audio pretty much. Of course, the CAV version is going to be better looking than the CLV version. Of course, you're also going to have to get up more times. The side bricks seemed okay. I don't remember anyone being too jarring, but it's been a little while since I've watched this. I need to rewatch this and, re-examine it on my setup and see what my second impressions are. But anyway, this is definitely the most common full CAV release along with the director's cut of Blade Runner. So if you want a film in full CAV to show off your setup and stuff, you can easily pick this up, and it has the really great AC3 track. Here's another one I've never actually seen, but I've always thought the cover looked interesting. This is the letterbox release of Breakdown, the Kurt Russell film. Has a different style Dolby Digital sticker on here to indicate the AC3 track. Also has a 2.0 Pro Logic track. It's a Pioneer pressing, and I haven't got the chance to spin this one up yet, but it's in almost perfect shape, and I've always loved the artwork design of this film, so I've always thought that seemed really interesting, so I'll have to check this out. Nice jacket and really nice rear cover that goes along with this Paramount disc, so I have to check this out. Now here's one a lot of people are going to be able to tell you about. This is the letterbox release of Contact. Of course, this title is known as a pretty heavy rotter. I was lucky enough to pick this one up, and it's actually one of the pressings that doesn't have rot. You can look up the film's LDDB page and actually see it was pressed by some different plants on different manufacturing runs. So if you want to see the film on Laserdisc without rot, you'll have to actually do some research. But it's a nice looking jacket. Of course, uses the original artwork on the front. You know, at least it uses the top and bottom half instead of having the dead space on the sides. It does have the Dolby AC3, and it does sound better in AC3 versus the 2.0. People have reviewed the available Blu-ray and say that it was not remixed, and the Blu-ray actually sounds better even than the Laserdisc. So if you want a completely rot-free copy for cheap, you can easily get the film in HD on Blu-ray with lossless 5.1 and extras. So this is just if you're a diehard fan of the film, or you come across a copy that seems rot-free for cheap. And again, anytime you can find a disc from later on in the life cycle, it's always interesting to see what they could achieve. This disc, even though it's a Warner title, is actually distributed by Image because it's getting closer towards the new millennium. So it looked like even the studios were starting to move around their distribution cycles. You do get a audio commentary though, so that's at least a nice bonus to make this give this some replay value. But of course, that's also on the later releases. So here's another title that's definitely known for being a heavy rotter. This is the letterbox release of The Fifth Element, and as many can tell you, this is one of the heaviest rotter titles around. Pretty much 9 times out of 10, you find one of these, it's going to have rot or be rotted all the way through. I got extraordinarily lucky one day finding this in the local record store, and realizing it's actually a Pioneer rot-free pressing. Almost all these were pressed by the DADC plant, so much so that diehard fans who want the Laserdisc usually go out and get the Japanese version, which of course has different cover art and cost quite a bit of money, but they say that the picture transfer is not as good on the Japanese version, so that is something to consider. That being said, if you do manage to track one of these down, this is one of the best looking titles on the format. It has a absolute reference picture transfer for Laserdisc. It's one of those discs you put in and you're watching on a good setup and you forget it's a Laserdisc until the side change hits. You swear that it's a DVD most of the time, and I'm sure the first DVDs came from the same master because it looks like the way I first saw it, which was on DVD. Of course, uses the original poster artwork very well. It's a non-gatefold, so it's very easy to get dinged up. The rear cover is pretty nice and has the usual Sony Columbia very detailed notes about the film. Of course, in a very smallish print, so you're going to have to squint a little bit. But it's a nice looking rear cover, and you get your chapter breakdown here. 3-sided with the final side being CAV. And again, the 5.1 is excellent, far better than the 2.0, so you will need a demodulator for this one. So all around, this is one of the 5 or 6 best presentation Laserdiscs that I've come across. I just wish it was easier for people to find one that was a rot-free pressing. So highly recommended. Just if you come across this in the bins, you're going to have to check the actual disc mint markings in the center ring to try to find a Pioneer pressing that matches the numbers on the LDDB entry. So absolutely great title. Here's the letterbox release of Grosse Pointe Blank, the really interesting, dark, whimsical comedy. that, gosh, I haven't seen this in ages. I really have to rewatch it. This transfer is pretty good. I watched it when I first got it, but it's been a while since then. Has a ProLogic digital track and a Dolby AC3. It's a Disney disc via Hollywood Pictures, so you get the usual Disney terminology in the bottom. Otherwise, it's a basic looking jacket. It's identical to the DVD, and this will finally come out on Blu-ray, so you can watch it in HD if you want. But being a later title, it's not super rare or anything, but it's not the most common of this. But you shouldn't have to pay too much for it. The transfer's pretty nice. Pretty much it's the same as the DVD for the most part, and the AC3 sounds very nice, even though it is mostly a dialogue-driven film with a couple sequences that use the surrounds, but it does sound better than the 2.0 mix. Now here's a very underrated film that I've loved ever since I saw it, and it's well known to the Laserdisc Forever page because it was one of our featured Discs of the Month titles. This is the letterbox release of The Saint, the 1997 adaptation of the classic adventure character. Just a lovely looking cover that uses the original theatrical one sheet. I've always loved the design of this, even though it's a pretty simple usage of the star space, but I always love the design and the blue coloring and the fog and everything. It looks a lot more impressive on the Laserdisc jacket than the DVD. You get your sticker with the THX stamp and the Dolby Digital stamp, and then identifying that it does have a commentary from Philip Noyce, which is actually a very informative, good commentary. Not, a rollicking good time for 2 hours, but a solid, very technical, very warm commentary that actually mentions some of the post-production that happened. The studio recalled the film and they reshot the ending after some test previews didn't score too well on the cards, so the entire ending of the film was changed. So if you know the film, you can kind of see where that would have happened, but I definitely recommend seeing the film and looking into that if you're interested. The film got a lot of flack for not really doing the original character 100%, and back in the 90s they kind of viewed it as a movie trying to be Bond-like, but it does have its own identity, and it kind of plays around with the original rules and elements of the character in an interesting way, I think. In a lot of ways, it's sort of a what they would call in modern terms a prequel to the character you know and love. This kind of predates a lot of what has happened with not only modern comic book films, but modern franchises in general, especially when they get reinvented or they're brought back after a very long time, starting fresh. So it is a really interesting film. It's not perfect, but it's really made by the direction. This was made by Philip Noyce right after he did the two Jack Ryan films with Harrison Ford, Patriot Games and Clear and Present Danger. And some of the same production team came over from that. It was the first film to shoot in Russia after the collapse of the Soviet Union, so it was actually shot on location with the Russian sequences. So I find that extremely interesting from a historical standpoint, and it looks nice. The scenes in here look a lot more convincing, say, for example, than the scenes outside the Kremlin in Ghost Protocol, which, of course, was much later. But anyway, it has a really nice soundtrack with some really good sound design and really great usage of electronica songs and electronic music of the time period. The film is very well known for having a very influential music from soundtrack release with all of these songs that were very expertly picked out of the time period. It's one of the well-known electronic CDs of the time period. So the sound design and usage of the source cues is very well done. The 5.1 is much better than the 2.0. The same transfer was used for the DVD, but the DVD adds so much processing and noise that if your setup is really good, I would actually say the Laserdisc is going to give you the better presentation. I've had the DVD for years and thought they would be the same, but I was pleasantly surprised that I enjoyed the Laserdisc more. So again, a really nice solid release, great AC3, underrated film that's really made by the two lead performances and the direction. It has its own character and style, so I would definitely recommend giving it a try if you're at all a spy or adventure fan. But again, it really deserves an HD release. Hopefully this will come out on Blu-ray at some point because it really needs it, particularly with the original ending. But for the meantime, this is the best release you can get. Yes, the DVD is available. Yes, it's technically better, but the Laserdisc, in my opinion, gives you the better presentation. So, and it's also very cheap because it's a common release. Now here's one that a lot of Laserdisc fans know and have talked about. This is the letterbox release of Deep Impact. Really nice looking jacket. Just very, very impactful. Of course, this came out at the same time as Armageddon, so like Dante's Peak and Volcano coming out at the same time, it was kind of one of those Battle of the Disaster movies. This is generally viewed as being the more intelligent of the two by far. Again, not the greatest film, but certainly a much more intelligent end-of-the-world apocalypse movie than Armageddon is. Gets the THX mastering stamp, has a ProLogic 2.0 track along with the Dolby AC3. The AC3 is the way to go. It's a great reference track. The film is very well known and respected for its sound design. Of course, it's out on DVD and Blu-ray now. And if I'm remembering correctly, Dislord on the LDDB forums wrote a lot of technical information about the sound design and the soundtrack itself, and said that pretty much all the versions are great. I can't remember. I don't have the Blu-ray, and I've been meaning to pick it up because the sound design is really, really good for the time period. But this is a later release, Paramount via Pioneer Pressing. It's a very, very nice transfer. And it's also not the most common of this. I was very happy to actually finally find one. It's not super rare or anything, but you just don't really come across it. Certainly, and it's certainly not really remembered that much in the by most people. Most people are always going to remember Armageddon for many reasons. Everything from Over the Top to that darn song that won't go away. But anyway, it's an underrated film. I think it holds up relatively well, and I actually need to rewatch this on my setup and give it a second go around and see what I think. But if you find it, definitely pick it up for the sound design alone. And again, it's just not that common of a disc. So, all right, so here we have a pretty late release from MGM UA. This is the Man in the Iron Mask, the 1998 version. Of course, you can tell it's a later pressing because of the updated MGM logo, the updated letterbox black bar across the top. It's a nice glossy jacket, of course, non-gatefold, so very easy to damage. It's a former rental copy, but I found it for super cheap, and since it's such a late release, I figured I'd give it a shot. It has a 2.0 ProLogic included track in addition to the Dolby AC3. It does have an audio commentary on the analog tracks. And the DVD of this is pretty much a port of this Laserdisc. I mean, it's the same master. This was distributed by Image, who seemed to pick up most of the major studios' last Laserdisc releases. On all my later releases, I see that most of them were distributed by Image, whether it was Warner Brothers, MGM, even Saving Private Ryan, which is my last American Laserdisc that I have, if I'm remembering correctly. That was also released by Image. So that's kind of interesting to note for people who like researching about the late release schedules. But anyway, it's a nicer looking jacket. It's pretty simple on the rear here. I guess this is designed to look like the prison walls. If you look very closely, it's sort of a like a wall of a battlement or prison or something, but it's very hard to tell. Otherwise, pretty standard looking. The AC3 is better than the 2.0, and of course you can easily get the film on DVD. It's also available on Blu-ray, which is very cheap, and I have that one, so I compared it to this. I spun some select sequences, and they appear pretty much the same. The Blu-ray's okay. It's not great or anything. It's just a regular MGM Blu-ray. Shout Factory announced recently that they're going to do a reissue, so I don't know if they're going to do a new transfer, but they're most likely going to do some extras. I don't really know why. It's not like this film had, thousands clamoring for a special edition or something, but I just thought that was kind of interesting. So, of course, there's also a DTS variant. That's, of course, very rare and very expensive, but I don't know if it's going to be head or shoulders above this release. and certainly it's a lot more expensive than the Blu-ray with lossless audio. So this is just one of those I picked up because it's a later release, and you can do the same if you come across it cheap in the bins. It looks like a really nice transfer and a nice AC3 track for the time period, but of course the DVD is much more available, identical, and far cheaper, and the Blu-ray is equally cheap and actually HD. So this is just one of those really nice late releases, so I just couldn't say no. Here's another one that's just a later release that's kind of been surpassed by some other ones. This is the letterbox edition of Mercury Rising from Universal. Has the THX and Dolby sticker on it. I picked this one up sealed, so I figured I'd give it a shot since it literally just was in perfect shape. And I quite like the jacket using the original poster artwork, which does kind of look much more dynamic on this Laserdisc jacket than the DVD and Blu-ray covers. I think this film is kind of underrated. It's kind of got elements of the Die Hard series, well, at least the earlier, more serious and darker ones. And I think Bruce Willis was doing some more interesting work as an actor in the 90s, you know, kind of pushing the boundaries of his screen persona a bit more than nowadays. So I think it's definitely interesting for that respect. It's got a couple cheesy bits which really kind of drag the movie down, but overall it has a much more heartfelt and character-driven tone than I was expecting. So I just wish the silly bits had, you know, been excised. I think it could be a lot better, but I also think it's got a lot more to it than people give it credit for. It has a really wonderful John Barry score, and of course I'm a huge John Barry fan, so I tried to see any picture he ever scored, and the score really comes across very well in the AC3 track, which is more expansive and sounds better than the 2.0 Pro Logic mix. But the Pro Logic mix is fine and sounds good in and of itself, so don't let that stop you from watching it. The disc was pressed by Pioneer, and it's a rather nice transfer. I believe the DVD reused it, and there was also a DTS Laserdisc and a DTS DVD. The DTS DVD is an early title, so it has the same full bitrate DTS track as you would find on the DTS Laserdisc. I've been trying to collect a lot of those whenever I come across one, so I'll have to check that out if I can ever find it. But usually that's a much cheaper alternative to track one of those down than the very expensive DTS Laserdisc. They have roughly equivalent audio tracks in terms of size and the tech specs before DVDs were regulated to cutting those essentially in half down to a bit rate of 755 kilobits per second, down from about 1500. But anyway, long story short, so this has been outclassed by the DVD, and then the Blu-ray is pretty nice and very cheap. Not a great HD transfer, but a solid one. And I compared the two, and you know, they seemed, you know, roughly compatible. Didn't notice any real big changes in terms of picture outside of the quality jump to 1080p. And the audio seemed mostly the same, but this is another case, like with Broken Arrow, I found myself just liking the tone and the feel of the Laserdisc AC3 more, but that may be, you know, I don't think my demodulator really colors any audio, but sometimes you just can't help but prefer having to use all kinds of extra gear and equipment to get that magical Dolby light to light up. But then sometimes there have been cases where the Laserdisc AC3 is mixed a little different, or seems to be a little untouched as compared to the lossless audio rendering. And sometimes they're exactly the same, and the only difference is that the Blu-ray has some EQ differences, or some it's just got something going on that seems to color the track a little bit. Just for example, the DTS discs that I have, I've compared those extensively to the lossless Blu-ray mixes. I only have 3 of them, but in all 3 cases, even though the tracks seem identical, I have to give the nod to the DTS Laserdisc audio for just sounding, you know, a tiny bit hotter, a tiny bit more dynamic, and just a little bit more involving. And those 3 films I'm extremely familiar with, those being The Shadow, Goldeneye, and Tomorrow Never Dies. So I've done a lot of playback testing back and forth. I've, you know, done level matching. I've done all kinds of different things. So just sometimes it just seems like these have a bit more of a wow factor, even in these small AC3 tracks. But again, that may be my ears just playing tricks on me on this one and some others, but that's just my own findings. So if you come across this, I definitely recommend it. You know, there are worse ways to waste 2 hours, and it's certainly better than a lot of modern action thrillers, even some Bruce Willis ones. But of course, it's been supplanted by the DVDs and the Blu-ray, and of course the very expensive DTS version. I feel like I'm a broken record on that. I'd love to try some more, but for the cost, you can buy every other version of a movie plus 10 or 20 or 30 others and still not have enough to buy a DTS Laserdisc. So yes, they're nice and all, but sometimes the price just doesn't necessitate it, and the AC3 is much better for a buck or two. Now here's the last release of the main shelves. This is the letterbox edition of Ransom, the extended version. Has a Dolby Digital sticker and has the THX stamp along with a ProLogic 2.0 and AC3 track. Of course, it is a Disney disc in disguise, being a Hollywood Pictures release. You get the blurbage of a Disney disc on the bottom. I would go with the AC3 over the 2.0. It's a nice track, and the AC3 just does everything better than the 2.0 does. Now, the reason why this disc is important and why you should pick it up, it includes 18 minutes of deleted footage that's been reincorporated into the film. All the other releases just have it as bonus features in standard def, but this is the only release, along with the Japanese Laserdisc, that actually have it reincorporated, so then the film runs about 2 hours and 20 minutes or so. Now, it's been a long time since I've seen the theatrical version, so I can't tell you, 100% if this is better or an improvement over the theatrical version. I'll have to rewatch that and, kind of get a feel for how the theatrical edit works. But if you're interested in this cut, this is the only way to get it. The Japanese release also had a DTS version, but only in Japan. That happened with a lot of later releases where the Japanese release would get AC3 or DTS or both, and the US would only get one or none. There are a number of releases that only got ProLogic here that got AC3 or DTS or both over there. So that's something to note, but the Japanese DTS release of the extended version usually goes for top dollar, whereas this can be had for $1 or $2. So the price difference is certainly huge, and if you're interested in this, you can you can find it most anywhere. It's relatively common, and the film itself, I think, is quite underrated. It's one of the better Ron Howard pictures for sure, and I always thought it was interesting that it was based around a story plot concept that had been developed by Richard Maybaum, who of course is most notable for being the writing backbone of the Bond series, and in my opinion one of the most unheralded screenwriters of all time. So I've always tried to seek out other things that he did, and so I thought it was interesting that this was originally going to be a picture done far sooner than the 90s. So anyway, it's an above average thriller with this exclusive extended version with a 5.1 AC3 track, so I would recommend it, and it's the only way to get the longer version. And it's also a pretty nice looking late release. So, and that does it for the main shelves of my collection. That takes us up to 98, and I know I kind of use the late release term a little loose. I consider anything 97, 98, 99, 2000 to be a late release. Some people just hold that to the late 98, 99, and final releases, but as long as it's past 97 and 98, I pretty much label it a late release. I don't really have too many more of the others because they are not only quite rare due to being pressed and sold in limited quantities, but they're very prized and extremely valuable and go for top dollar. So that makes it very difficult to pick some of them up, especially when almost all of them were ported to DVD and are available for sometimes even 99 cents. For example, Bringing Out the Dead is one of the final Laserdiscs, and only has a ProLogic mix, whereas I got the DVD for $1, and that has a 5.1 track. So that's one of those where it started to completely converge. The popularity of DVD had risen to a point, and Laserdisc had fallen off to a certain point where films would start getting better transfers on one format versus the other, even with the same master. So you could see where the focus had completely shifted. All right, so we're going to go through my few music discs along with some test setup discs and a promotional disc. I don't have too many music discs, but here's one I've managed to pick up. This is the NXS live video entitled Live Baby Live, after the lyric from New Sensation, or I guess you could say Live Baby Live. I always thought that was a clever title for this. Lovely cover shot. Not too common of a disc, so I was happy to find it. Of course, if I'm not mistaken, this show has been released on DVD, but it's them at Wembley Stadium in 1991. It's a 133 disc from presumably either, I don't know if it was video or a film shoot, but it looks nice, and it has a digital PCM stereo track, which sounds great. So this is just a nice concert disc release from when they were really at their stadium performing height. Really nice show of, one of the great, still really underrated bands, I think. And again, not too common of concert release, so I was happy to find it. This is a recent pickup, and again, some of these are so cheap sometimes you can't say no. This is the Paul is Live in concert release of the show from the World Tour. I believe this is from about 93 or so. There's an accompanying live CD also called Paul is Live. I know my mom had that and wore it out when I was growing up, so I immediately recognized this cover image from that era. Nice looking jacket. I've always loved the image, kind of spoofing the famous Abbey Road shot. Still in the shrink wrap, a release from Polygram Video. I think there's two different releases of this. If you look up on the LDDB page, I think the right holders changed, so I think Polygram did this one, and I think it was just reissued under a different number and stuff. So again, nice transfer, really high production values for the time, of course. Great set list, really nice digital PCM sound. That's really why I picked this up. And again, it was dirt cheap, so I've only listened to a couple tracks. I haven't got time to watch the whole show, but I'm going to have to do that pretty soon. Again, I do believe this has come out on DVD at some point or another, so this is really just to pick up if you're a big fan or you come across it cheap or you really want to check out the PCM stereo track. A number of music releases are pretty good about having a PCM track, but that's not always. So on some of these, you're going to come into a point where the DVD has better video, but only a lossy audio track or a 5.1 remix, and the Laserdisc will have a PCM stereo track. Now here's one where I just picked it up simply because I actually found one. This is REM's This Film Is On, one of their several Warner Brothers era video releases. This is a compilation of some of their music videos. It also came out on VHS tape, and it's also been released on DVD along with the others they did at this time. So of course the artwork looks much more impressive on a Laserdisc jacket. Other than that, it's not really any different from the other releases. You get a PCM stereo track on this CLV disc. The DVDs of these Warner Brothers releases also have a PCM stereo track, so that's a nice way to get them, much cheaper because the DVDs are a lot cheaper than the Laserdisc. With that being said, the DVDs are not all that common for this, tour film, parallel, road movie, all of the Warner's era 1990s releases they did. So essentially what you're getting is a collection of some of their music videos from the Out of Time period. You do get a acoustic version of Losing My Religion, which is great. So if you're an REM fan or you're just going for completion, you can pick this up either on this Laserdisc or on DVD. But again, they're just not too common, and since I'm such a huge fan and I'm going for completion in a lot of ways, I just figured, why not? Here is the original standard release of U2's Rattle and Hum, the original Paramount 133 open matted disc with a digital Dolby Surround encoded track, which sounds lovely. Of course, this was their theatrical feature based in and around the big Joshua Tree tour, so it takes elements from various shows, and then of course was tied into the album release. That was a mixture of a live album and then new studio material. Some fans really like it, some fans really hate it. It's kind of a line in the sand for most U2 fans and non-fans. But the film itself is definitely of its time period. It was later supplanted by a letterbox Laserdisc reissue with a AC3 5.1 track added. And that's much harder to come by. Not super rare, but it's definitely not as common as this one. And then, of course, it's hit DVD and then, I believe, HD DVD. I think it's out on Blu-ray as well with a 5.1 mix. But I wanted to see this one because, again, different framing, older transfer, but it does have the original Dolby Stereo 2.0 surround mix. So I wanted to compare that. And anytime, especially anything music related, the more untouched the audio, the better, I think. And also, I just wanted to, hear the track, see if it was any different. And this release is much cheaper. It's a very common disc. You'll only have to pay $1 or $2 for this one, as opposed to maybe $5 or $10 for the widescreen version. You do get the selections. The songs are actually chapter encoded. I got thrown off. Yeah, it goes, contains 9 songs not included on the album, which is always one of those nice selling points. But anyway, no special features, which there are a few on the DVDs and such. So again, this is really just more for completion, having a 133 opened up image and the original 2.0 surround track. There's been some discussion whether or not the widescreen version had a remixed audio track. A lot of U2 releases get remixed later on, but I don't have that version, and I don't think I have the DVD anymore, but I'm gonna have to get one of those later ones and do a detailed audio comparison. But all that aside, this is actually a pretty nice disc for the time period when it was made, pressed about 89 or so, or 1990. So again, not the best version available, but it has the original audio track and is dirt cheap. So at least you get some great songs in there. Here's another one that's come out on DVD, but the Laserdisc is really nice. This is the U2 Zoo Live from Sydney release from the Zoo TV tour in the early 90s. Of course, the artwork looks much more impressive on the Laserdisc versus the DVD version. It's a gatefold, which is really impressive. You get Bono in his Mephisto phase there, and it's treated very, very well. This is printed like a really good vinyl gatefold. And then you get another shot from that era. Just beautiful. I mean, it's worth it to have the Laserdisc of this release simply for the gatefold imagery. I've always felt around this time, the Achtung Baby Zooropa era, they had some of the best band photos around that time. This is when they were really pushing the artistic boundaries, at least. Lovely back cover, gives you the songs, the chapter listings per sides, spread across 3 sides with no real special features or anything. But it's a nice polygram release. Looks a lot more fancy with the cover artwork than most music discs are. Of course, this has come out on DVD since then, and I think it has some extras and things. So you'll have to track that down if you want, the more complete version. However, this does give you PCM stereo, which sounds great. And again, not too common of a release. I picked this up with the Ryland Hum disc, so I picked up one and figured I had to pick up the other one. But just a lovely package, I have to say. Now, here's one that's got a little bit of a technical history. This is the BMG Video Special Edition release of The Kids Are All Right, the 1978 film made by Jeff Stein about The Who. And of course, it went along with the tie-in album of B-sides, rarities, and live cuts from various eras. Basically, a documentary and anti-documentary of sorts about the band. Really, you have to see it if you're a fan at some point or another. And if you're a fan, you've probably already seen it 100 times, and that's not enough. It's definitely a document of the times, but at this point in 1978, the band's history had never really been chronicled. It has some of their really great performances and some really interesting TV moments. And but what's interesting about this disc and the various later versions, The film was eventually remastered for and restored for the DVD release. They had to track down all the original elements. They had to do a completely new version and build it up from scratch. Basically go find all the original materials that they had found back in '78 and rescan them, retransfer them, and do a completely new version. And they also did a 5.1 surround mix from that. And they used that and pulled from the various remastered songs for the studio material that came from the actual studio albums. But what that did was that it provided a version that was not quite 100% what you would have seen in 1978, with all of the warts and the original mixes and the various tracks that were in mono, had been stereoized on the 5.1 mix and such. And that was later touched up for the Blu-ray release, but that's now out of print and goes for very high dollars, so you can't even really get that anymore. So if you get the DVD, just be aware, yes, it has more extras if you find the special edition, and yes, it's in widescreen, but it's a completely new restoration and a completely new audio track, which is not really bad per se, but it's not the original 1978 film. Now, that being said, this release is a 133 transfer, and it does have a digital track that's a mixture of mono and stereo, as the original was, but it does seem to be either transferred from a PAL master running at 25 frames per second, and it wasn't converted right, because it seems to run at too high of a pitch and too high of a speed, just barely. And it's kind of inconsistent, so it's not like it's constantly running 4% faster as PAL discs do. But you can definitely hear it, especially if you're like me and you're really familiar with the songs. So just be aware that if you seek this one out, yes, it's more authentic, but it also runs at the wrong speed. And if you're at all a collector of The Who, you know right off the bat they are about the hardest band to collect for, because of all of the various alternate versions of songs, pitches, speeds, alternate cuts of things, alternate editions of even the same live tracks differ between releases. So it's certainly fitting that the major Who Laserdisc and DVD release is problematic and makes you have to go out and own 3 or 4 different versions. Keeping on that track, here is the Laserdisc release of the Who's Who's Better, Who's Best video compilation. Again, this is a mix of television recordings, live footage, and studio footage, chronicling their history, kind of giving you a video document of them as both a live band and some of their various TV appearances. Of course, this came out on VHS tape. It's been out on DVD. They've reissued it on DVD and changed some of the track listings and such. So if you look at this release, even though the DVD gives you some extra tracks, it actually drops a song from here. I'm trying to remember which one it is. Let me see. I can't remember exactly which song it is because I don't have the other in front of me. I think it may be, I want to say it's Joined Together, but I can't remember off the top of my head. But one song on here is not on the DVD version, and it's a well-loved live song recording, if I'm remembering correctly, because it's been a while since I watched through this, but I know this has one particular song that was dropped from the DVD, and that's why I wanted to seek it out. It is a digitally encoded sound disc, so you get a digital stereo track. If I remember correctly, some of these songs are actually in mono, and that's fine, that's what they should be. And it was pressed 2 different ways. This is the polygram version, and it has the CD video logo, even though it's actually from the early 90s. It looks like an older disc. But the 2 versions are actually identical. It's just the cover and the catalog number have some different icons and such. But again, for being a Who fan and for completion's sake, you have to pick this up simply because it has an extra song that was dropped from the DVD release. It also has a PCM track that's noticeably different from the DVD because the DVD got remastered, and kind of pastes over some of the things with the remastered CD versions of some of the songs. It also includes a DTS and Dolby Digital 5.1 remix. So again, this is a little bit more authentic. The picture quality is nowhere near as good as the DVD, of course, but anyway, that's just for completion's sake. Well, that does it for my music discs. I'm going to move on to my 2 setup discs. And if you're at all in Laserdisc and you already don't have one of these or don't know what these are, mark it down and get one immediately, because this is absolutely essential stuff. Now, this is the older disc. This is what was available first. This is the Video Standard Laserdisc release by Joe Kane Productions. This is what you use to optimize and do all of your setup on your television for proper Laserdisc playback and trying to get your TV as close to the spec standard as possible. Of course, this was later supplanted by Video Essentials, which we're going to do next, but if this is what you have, or this is all you can find at the moment, you can at least do the setup patterns and, get your TV pretty much on point. It's not going to be as refined as Video Essentials because that was much later and was much more advanced, but this will at least get you most of the way there. Has a gatefold with a lot of notes trying to help you get even closer to having your standards on point. It also gives you some pointers and tips about audio, which is also part of the program. This release is more has more on the video setup than the audio setup, but it primarily is going to tell you about proper speaker placement, and it's going to be discussing Dolby Surround encoding, which was at the time the only real surround methodology they had for home video in most home systems. Anyway, you get some nice diagrams and things. It's a nice little release, and if this is what you have or this is all you can find, definitely go ahead and grab it. Don't overpay for one of these, but you definitely need one at some point or another. Again, rear cover is pretty straightforward. All the stuff is pretty much on the disc for the most part. And this forms the basis of what Video Essentials is. Video Essentials takes even some of these same test material bits and reuses them, but advances all the other explanations and materials and test patterns. And don't think this has an insert. Yeah, it doesn't have the blue filter or the insert or anything. But anyway, this is what you're going to... oh, I had to take that back. My bad. This does have the Video Standard pamphlet here in the front part of the gatefold. Just kind of really to help you follow along with the on-screen program. Gives you some notes about where things are hidden on the chapter markers and throughout, and more technical data. So it's nice if you find this actually in the jacket itself. So that's Video Standard, and now we move on to the tried and true, and what absolutely belongs in every single Laserdisc collection. You have to have this at some point, and you're going to use it so many times. This is Video Essentials, the upgraded and corrected version of Video Standard. There are two versions of this because the sound program has a section on Dolby AC3. And if I remember correctly, there was an error in the first printing run of these that messed up the AC3 track in a couple test places. So you'll want to make sure that you look on LDDB and you get the Video Essentials version that has the corrected catalog number. If you get the other one, everything else works fine. So just be aware that the AC3 portion is going to be a little bit off. And there's also a DVD version of this with this exact same cover, the first DVD version of Video Essentials. I actually got that first. I didn't realize until I got this. It's almost exactly the same program, but the DVD is mastered in component digital. So if you can't find this, and you're like me and you stumble across the old snapper case DVD of Video Essentials for $1 in a record store bin, that will actually get you pretty close if you, especially if you run it through a DVD player and use a composite out and to your TV like you would with your Laserdisc player. If you can't find this, you can't afford one, or you don't have one yet, and you manage to find that. I think that particular disc is on eBay for like $2 or $3 shipped, so that's a very cheap way out. It won't be really exact because you need a test pattern coming from your specific Laserdisc player to then calibrate your TV for your specific player. But as a cheap, in-between thing, if you haven't gotten a disc yet or you don't want to pay, sometimes these go for 20 or 25 bucks, which is silly, but some people mark them up because they know you have to have one. It's a cheap out. You can get other test patterns, or you can get the early DVD version of this. But anyway, This isn't a gatefold, but it's a single jacket. Looks a lot fancier, and you see here it has the note about not only Dolby Surround but Dolby AC3. So this will help you, move your speakers around and set them up correctly. Although there are a lot more advanced programs for that in this day and age. You're really just picking this up for the most part to get your player set up as well as you can on your display device. And you see here it talks about how this is supposed to replace a video standard, so it's got a picture of it here. This is, of course, another Joe Kane's production disc that replaces the original version. So anyway, this is just something you have to have, even if you borrow it from a friend and only use it once to set your screen up with your player output. And everything is pretty self-explanatory. It walks you through each step first. It gives you opportunities to then try it yourself. And then at the end, it gives you all the test patterns, so then you can just do it to your heart's content and not have to worry about the time period ending for you to do your setup patterns. And everything's laid out very well in chapters, so you can always go back and re-listen to a certain section, or just go to the test pattern you want to find and use your jog wheel on your remote to actually go to each specific pattern and then adjust your screen from there. Now on this one, when you do the color setup, it includes a blue filter to make sure you set your color balancing correctly. And this is going to be important to get your color just right, to actually have this blue filter. This is what it looks like here. You're going to hold this in front of your eyes to then make sure that the color levels are balanced properly. If you don't have this, you won't be able to have your color exactly right. And what you do is you literally just look through here, and I don't know if you can see this very well. It's actually basically a strip of film that's been printed with the correct shade of blue on it. And when you look through this, it's basically going to blue out the correct pattern. And you're going to want it to then be uniform if it's correct. So you want to make sure you have this in there. It's just literally tucked in with the disc itself. Again, it's not a deal breaker if you don't have it. You can get replacements or make one. It's also bundled in with the DVD and Blu-ray versions of Video Essentials. So if you have those, you can simply use that. Now last is my only promotional disc. This is the MGM UA Laserdisc Home Video Sampler for promotional use only, but it's basically just a compilation of trailers from currently released or upcoming Laserdisc transfers. So basically imagine the old promos that used to be on the front of VHS releases primarily. They weren't really on Laserdisc releases for the most part, but I still remember to this day the old VHS promos that would have the really nice music pieces and just show various clips from either famous films or recent blockbuster hits or recent dramas that were successful that the studio owned and stuff they were bringing out on video or wanted to promote. They would make these, little sizzle trailers. So essentially this is like a disc of simply that. I guess these would be used primarily at stores to have on in the background, and it will showcase either the trailer or various scenes from the films that they either have available currently or about to come out. And they're actually broken up into categories. You have the introduction, then you have some modern titles, you go into comedies, action, adventure, sci-fi, some classic animation, then you have some musical selections, and then classics, and then ending with segments from epics, and then having a small in credit crediting MGM. Paramount had several of these, MGM had several of these. You can actually look up all these on the LDDB. There's not a whole lot of them, and they're not really essential or anything, but it's part of a bygone era that doesn't really exist anymore, with everything being online or easily available on websites, checking out various releases that are either out already or it's very easy to get your information somewhere else. So this is just a nice piece to look through to either remind you of the earlier days of video, or old store displays and setups, or just to actually hear or see about films you never heard of or forgotten about. And it's not really something you're probably going to sit down and watch all the way through, and it's certainly not a test disc like the THX Wow disc was. But it's just a nice piece of history that definitely makes me flash back to my childhood. So And that does it for the main shelves. I really appreciate you guys checking this out and listening to me ramble on for way too long about Laserdisc. I'm going to finish the collection shelves. I've got to do a Criterion video for my Criterion shelf, and then a separate video for all my box sets, especially the ones that don't want to fit on any shelf due to their size. And then I'm going to finish up with the special series selections, a video for Star Wars, and then a video for my Bond collection. And those two are what actually got me started on this wonderful and crazy journey. I certainly never intended to amass this many Laserdiscs, but for the reasons I stated in my opening video introduction, and just the history and the quality and just the beautiful artwork, the packaging, everything, you just quickly get sucked in. And I hope you guys really enjoy this stuff, and I just really appreciate getting a chance to actually share some of this with just at least someone else who's going to actually listen to me prattle on about a format that's so dead and gone that most stores still think I'm buying, movie records. That's where you find them. You find them in little cardboard boxes on the floor underneath some shelves in the back. And people are wondering, well, why are you buying movie records? They're not even a soundtrack. So anyway, stay tuned for the next installments, and thanks for watching.